So moving on to the next section, as a Browns fan, you have so much insight into these kind of gold mine of a Cleveland Browns team, that us as Packers fans, Bengals fans don't really have. Is OBJ going to be healthy enough to perform at an elite tier? Is Kareem Hunt going to siphon off like too much of Nick Chubb's workload? Is Baker going to be like this viable long-term quarterback? And as a Browns fan, I want to know, what are your best and worst case scenarios for Baker Mayfield, Odell, and Kareem Hunt?
All right, so I attempt, and it's not always successful, but I attempt to try to put my Browns fandom to the side when playing fantasy football. But it is difficult to do. Part of playing fantasy football is we want to enjoy the process. And so you have guys you want to root for, and that tends to be players on the team that you root for. So I try to be as unbiased as possible, but that's not possible to completely do. So going with these three players, I think Baker Mayfield is a great super flex quarterback. If I'm in a 1 QB dynasty league, I don't think that there's a situation where I'm looking at him as my true, without a doubt, quarterback one. I think that there are scenarios. We saw several games last year that were just atrocious weather. We had a game where all of his wide receivers were out due to COVID. He literally had no practice squad guys that he was passing the football to. There were a lot of weird situations, and he still, over the second half of the season, was from weeks, I want to say 11 on, was quarterback 8 over that stretch. So he had a very good end of the season, but it is still in Cleveland. There's still going to be bad weather games. There's still going to be different things that crop up, and it is still going to be a run first offense. So the reason I like Baker Mayfield is a lot of guys in Superflex League that I'm drafting around that tier are not safe guys. They're upside plays. Guys like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has great upside, but he's very, very risky. A guy like Kirk Cousins. Yes, he's established in his role right now, but they did draft Kellen Mond. There's rumors that Minnesota might be looking to move on. Derek Carr is another one where he seems to perennially be in the hot seat over in Vegas. So there's a lot of guys where you're you feel okay about them, but you don't have uber confidence at their long-term viability at the position. Whereas Baker Mayfield is without a doubt Cleveland's quarterback. There's no questions about it. There's no reason to doubt it. And I think that's the biggest argument for taking Baker Mayfield somewhere between quarterback 11 and quarterback 13, 14 in super flex leagues, is because you have the confidence that he's going to be the team's quarterback for a long time. And he has the ability in this offense with an elite offensive line, upside playmakers at wide receiver, and an elite running game where he can have weeks where he puts up 3 and 4 touchdowns. And that ceiling is there. But I think the most realistic perspective is, if you expect Baker to come in and be a low-end QB1, high-end QB2, and you're okay with year in, year out him being quarterback 13, then you're going to love having Baker Mayfield. If you expect this to be the most high-flying passing offense and then to turn into the Chiefs, you're going to be really disappointed, because I don't think that there's a scenario anywhere in the near future where he's a top 6 quarterback. I just don't think that's realistic. So safe, solid, but nothing flashy is really what it comes down to with Baker. For me, Odell Beckham is the biggest risk-reward player maybe in fantasy right now. I guess the risk isn't quite as high because where you're acquiring him is so much later than it was 2-3 years ago. You're taking him, his ADP is right around the mid 80s overall. So you're not having to use a top 3 round pick to acquire OBJ anymore. But we've seen his numbers take quite a precipitous dip over the past few years. He's been hampered with some injuries. He hasn't had the touchdown production that we want. So is there a world where he returns to being – let me put it this way. I don't think there's a world where he returns to being the number 1 overall receiver again. It's just not going to happen in this offense. Is there a world where he's a fringe wide receiver 1 again? That exists. That's a possibility. but I would say that is a low probability outcome for him. I would say the most likely outcome is he's a low to maybe mid-range wide receiver 2, with some upside weeks where he get you those 2 touchdowns and one of them being on a spectacular catch. But there's also a situation where Baker Mayfield's just gotten really comfortable with Jarvis Landry. Donovan Peoples-Jones has really developed, and you have 2-star running backs. So there's a situation where he ends up, missing a couple of games due to injury and doesn't produce as well, and he ends up being wide receiver 41 on the season. That world exists too. So it's a risk reward play with Odell. I ended up drafting him in the Scott Fish Bowl, and so simply because there's great upside for that ADP, but there's risk it could bottom out too. I'm not playing for 93rd place. I'm trying to win the whole thing. So he's got some upside. I'll take him there. Kareem Hunt is similar to Baker Mayfield. He's kind of the Baker Mayfield of running backs, where if you are looking to get this on a points per game basis, an RB1, he's not going to be. He's not going to get the rushing volume in order to be able to do that. And even though people view him as the Cleveland Browns passing down back, he actually didn't catch a ton of passes either, but he's very safe. Week in, week out, he's going to get you 8 points, 9 points. That's fine for your flex position or bye week because, CMC's out and you need to put somebody in. He's going to be fine in that sense, but don't expect anything more than running back 16. He's going to be somewhere between 16 and 24. And I think as long as you go in with that expectation, it's fine. So as a Browns fan, I know this wasn't like probably what people were hoping of, like, yeah, these guys are great and it's going to be awesome. I think you have to go in with tempered expectations for a lot of these players. There's some upside, but I think specifically with Baker and Hunt, they're safe plays. So they're not going to bottom out on you. You're not going to be mad you drafted them, but they're not going to hit this high peak that potentially Odell could, but he also offers way more risk than the other two.
For sure. And there's been this narrative going around that Baker plays worse when he has Odell on the field than when, Odell is hurt and not playing. What is your take on that as a Browns fan?
There's actually low-key a little bit of truth to that. And I think that was mostly because early in Odell's or early in Baker's career, Odell was the guy when he came to Cleveland. Like the hype that happened specifically in Cleveland, and I'm sure around the entire NFL world, but in Cleveland, it was like, we just got the LeBron James of football to come to Cleveland. This is unreal. And I think there was a lot of pressure for Baker to feed the football to Odell every single time he possibly could. And I think he was just honestly over-targeting Odell and just forcing it into bad situations. His QBR with him not on the field was about 20 points less. Or with him on the field was about 20 points less than it was when he was on the field. So he actually did produce worse numbers with Odell there. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that Odell actually makes him a worse quarterback. Odell's a fantastic playmaker. He's the best wide receiver on the team. No questions asked. But I think now Baker's finally mature enough to be able to go to somebody like Odell and be like, bro, you weren't open. Like, I can't force you the football. The play wasn't there. I think he's at that point in his career where he can say that now. I don't think he was there 2 years ago when Odell was first on the scene. So I think he can run his progressions and not have to be laser focused on Odell like he was before.
And I'm really excited to see, like, just from like forget fantasy, just from like a football fan perspective on what the Browns can do. Because, if I end up having a bunch of, 10 to like ranking between 10 and 15 players across my offense, adding all of those parts together leads to a really potent, dangerous, and Swiss Army knife like offense. And we saw what the Browns did last year with all the injuries that came around. I mean, even Nick Chubb, rip Nick Chubb, being out so long last year. Pretty much like that offense did not lose a beat. Kareem Hunt stepped in and was just like, hey, I've done this before, and I'm going to try and take away some of Nick Chubb's, sparkle and whatnot. I'm really excited to see what the Browns can do, especially before you guys have to pay Baker. Which that's we could talk about that one for like 5 hours, but
yeah, it's gonna be tough. There's a lot of mouths to feed right now. Not necessarily with delivering the football, but just this is the first time in my life that we've actually had this many players where we actually need to pay them. So it's not something I'm used to. It's usually like, hey, we got one good guy, let's pay him. So this is new territory for us Browns fans.